All right, hello everybody. We're back again with more design things because I had tried to write a presentation that was all development focused and it was not happening this month. There is not enough energy. So, game balance. It is a difficult thing to get right, and hopefully this gives some tools on how to navigate that and also why it's somewhat valuable. Fancy slides, dang it. So we're trying to examine some mechanics and other things that are very much unbalanced and trying to come up with ways to fix that in kind of an interactive way, engage the audience. And this is kind of my hot take here, is that there are two kinds of game balance, or at least two kinds of issues that you can have with game balance. First off is macro scale, which is kind of, this is very fundamentally flawed, versus micro scale, which is you could probably fix this with some minor tweaks. So yeah, micro tends to be a lot easier to fix, and this is usually what you see people fixing a lot of the live service multiplayer games with patch notes and whatever. Macro scale are much larger issues that need almost some serious game design reworks in order to figure them out. So in terms of micro scale, an example of this would be something like True Strike. If anyone has ever seen or heard anything relating to memes about D&D, you know about True Strike. You know that it's garbage, and let's examine exactly how it's garbage and how to fix it. So, got some relevant information that just pulled off D&D Beyond here, but fundamentally the first problem with this is that it only applies on your next turn. Even if everything else about it was fixed, this is a bit of a high cost to pay because you only have one action per turn, and this takes that action, despite the fact that it only applies on the next one. So you cast this spell, and then you wait for everyone else to go, and then it applies. That's the problem with it in and of itself, because it's just a standard buff. And they'll just say, okay, well, if it's just a buff, we could give it to the people who are usually applying buffs. This is where we get things like a lot of the non-combat caster classes here. And the problem with this is that it's a buff that you can only give to yourself. So we have made a dedicated buff spell that takes your entire turn to do, and it only applies to yourself, and it can only be used by people who aren't supposed to be hitting people with swords. So, knowing all of this, ideas on how to fix this one.
For Baldur's Gate 3, when I played it, I would just let you apply to someone else.
It's the logical thing to do with a lot of buffs. Is like, all right, if you want only your casters using the buffs, then just like let it apply to other people.
You can let it apply to other people, and sort of when you're first describing it, you're just like walking or readying, and so you can just combine this into just like how, if you're gonna cast this on yourself, and I think it also should weigh for the other classes that are actually included by it. If you cast it on yourself, it also like you could also block it or something.
Almost like,
I think that just makes up for like basing the team. You got it like.
so what kind of block we talking? Like it auto defends you when you cast this one?
Sort of like just readying. I've done readying things and realizing it might not be a book that you might be hoping.
Yeah. The only thing that's more expansive than the amount of mechanics D&D has for handling different things is the number of mechanics that people at homebrew tables have made in order to fix those problems. Wizards does not know how to balance a game, change my mind. These are the people who made an entire dedicated class feature for fighters. That was the superiority dice that they made, and it was really nice, and they had included that as a default feature in the class for 5th edition, and then they took it out and made it its own subclass, and then that's the only subclass that's worth playing because it's the only one that doesn't have a linear flow chart of what you're supposed to do. But yeah, that could also just be a pretty standard thing of like, sure, you cast this one, and then it also has you automatically take the one of maybe the defend or dodge or disengage. There are also dedicated actions for that, and like the nice thing about writing tabletop RPGs is you can just write that it has you take this action as well. That's just a sentence you could add on here. So yeah, other thoughts?
Yeah, so like, I just wanna say, I took the ability in Baldur's Gate, and then I realized that you could apply to other people, now it just sits there unused.
Yeah, feels bad.
Yeah.
There was one time, and these kinds of useless things disguise themselves. Like one time, I would consider myself decently experienced with the mechanics of D&D, and I was flipping through trying to make a sample character just for like whatever I was testing out, and I almost took True Strike in my spell list. I almost became the meme. But yeah. That's an example of kind of things that can be changed without any fundamental, like this doesn't change the fundamentals of the magic system or anything. This just like you gotta change a couple things about this spell to make it less stupid. Macro scale, on the other hand, is not like that. These are the features that are this XKCD. This was the best way that I could think of to describe these kinds of issues, but they are the ones that mean that you could kind of you need to fundamentally reconsider this feature rather than trying to paste on some number tweaks or whatever, because no amount of number tweaks are going to fix this problem. And this is also the soapbox about the fact that game design is hard because in games, everything affects everything else. And trying to track down the butterfly effect consequences of one change is an absolute nightmare sometimes. So yeah, this is an example where we have if anyone's familiar with Pokemon Gen 1 or any gen of Pokemon, they have the special stats for like special attack and special defense. In Gen 1, that was not a thing. That was just one stat called the special stat, and it made you good at both or terrible at both. So numerically, this was just, no, not that yet. Not yet. Not yet presentation. But it was just far better to spec into this than anything else, which is why the Gen 1 competitive meta was absolutely dominated with psychic types, because they all used special. Just because you have one stat that is categorically better than everything else because it doesn't divide and let you be, it doesn't let you be a glass cannon. It lets you either be an incredibly powerful tank, or it lets you be terrible at both of those. And I don't know if we need to take suggestions on how to fix this, given that there's already a canonical fix for this, but it seems like something of a cut and dry case. Other ideas, if we have any? Should I just move on? All right, you want to see broken? Let's talk broken. Anybody here heard of 40K? Yeah. Do I even need to explain the problem here? Because even if I don't need to, I'm going to explain all the problems with this faction because I love it so much. I love this faction and I'm going to strap it to the table and take it apart to figure out what's not ticking. And the answer to this one is that it's literally the entire faction identity. Because for context, there are 5 phases of every turn in this game. There are these 5. So you move your little units around, you do a little pea shooter thingy, space magic Yu-Gi-Oh! You got charge in order to hit people with swords and then hit people with swords. I don't know why that's a dedicated step apart from charging, but that's the way that they came up with it. And this is all well and good. A lot of the factions in this game use most of them, not all of them. I think the primary selling point for Grey Knights was that they play all the phases, but most of them at least play 4. Just because, you want to have options. You want to be able to engage on multiple levels with your opponent. And the problem with the Tau is that their entire faction identity is that they don't. Yeah, they are barred both in lore and in rules from ever using space magic. I do not know why. That's just a decision that they made. And also their stats are such that the entire hit people with sword step is terrible. They cannot, they have basically no melee viable units in the entire list of units that they have, which makes the entire point of the charge step entirely useless. So now we're down to 2 out of the 5 games phases that we're actually capable of using. And this has been a very widely recognized issue, specifically the inability to hit people with swords thing, because that's part of the fantasy of 40K, and also the fact that like they just haven't changed this. This has been a problem since the faction was released, and like they just suck at melee. Everyone knows that they suck at it. The fact that they suck at it is a meme is a meme. And again, more rules, or at least general tendencies of how things tend to work. You have ideas like cover, giving you protection against ranged attacks. You have ideas of like move your things forward in order to like get King of the Hill objectives or whatever. You have the very fundamental game design tenet of if you successfully attack a thing, the thing takes damage. Makes sense, right? Right? Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that very shortly. But also the fact that a dedicated unit that's supposed to fill a role has the stats that make it effective at filling that role. And I wouldn't have to mention any of these things if this faction of the Tau Empire didn't do all of these wrong. So as we discussed before, it only uses 2 of the 5 phases, just because of that's the way that they were made. We have a dedicated mechanic to make you ignore the entire point of cover entirely. If you notice on this table here. Yeah, number 4 here. If you have 4 or more little laser pointers on something, cover does not exist. We have made an entire feature to categorically ignore game mechanics. And because you can't hit people with swords, you can't close in, so turtling in one place rather than moving around is the dominant strategy for a lot of these. As well as the fact that they have this nice little thing about little robot drones that go along with them to decrease casualties. And if you try to do damage to one of their big robots that has some of these drones around them, they had a mechanic up until recently where one of those drones could just like fly in front of it and die, and you take no damage. You've completely no-sold that entire attempt at dealing any damage whatsoever, as well as the fact that their basic shooting units aren't actually that good at shooting. Their accuracy and especially armor penetration are middling at best for an entire force that is supposed to have some of the best plasma tech in the entire setting, and yet somehow stormtrooper accuracy, and also somehow they're the dedicated shooting army. How are you supposed to do anything with this? Now you'll notice that I have a dedicated asterisk on this last point, and that asterisk is this little table over here, the marker light table. This abomination is how you improve their ability to hit things and do the one thing that they're supposed to do. So you see on this like bottom one here, it does give you a +1 to roll if you have 5 little laser pointers on something. And you may be wondering, how do you get those laser pointers? The answer is that laser pointers are legally a weapon. So you have to actually roll dice in order to see whether the laser pointer hits the thing or not. And then you have to maybe have that go on this table to maybe give a bonus to your ability to actually hit something with actual damage. So this leads into just to review all of the myriad problems with this faction. There are a lot of them. And these are not problems that can be solved by tweaking numbers. I hope I've gotten that across. But yeah, this is the part of the presentation where I'm kind of gonna pivot into the more design aspect of, yes, we all realize that this is mechanically bad, but this also has far-reaching consequences on the gameplay experience and the like community that you're making for this game that requires multiple people to play. Yes.
Does the thing that lets them ignore cover, does that affect them or their opponents?
That affects their opponents.
Okay.
This is why you have a dedicated like unit of 5 people with like laser pointers, so you can like march them out there, point laser pointers at something that's like you, and then you're like big old robot with 2 railguns on it can like just completely ignore that building in the way. railguns are the one thing that this entire faction had going for them last edition, so you could see like the entire like list that people would play would change every single edition just based off of the fact that there would only be one strategy that was even viable for the faction, and everyone was forced to use that because they didn't have any other options because of all these terrible problems with their rules. And this kind of gets into what I'm calling the zoner problem, because this is also an issue with zoners in fighting games. They're the characters who kind of hang back and throw a whole bunch of projectiles or like very long reach, low damage attacks at you, rather than actually like getting up in your face and punching you. And people rightfully hate them for it because it's an entire gameplay style that is designed to frustrate people. That is the effect that it is designed to bring out, and it does so beautifully. Why are you confused when people hate you for this? And moreover, why'd you put it in a video game? Just ignoring everything else. Even if you know all this about this whole design of a character, why'd you put it in there in a game that's going to be played by people? You were going to say something? No. Okay, cool. But yeah, this runs into the similarities of the majority of the options they have don't operate on the same kind of wavelength as all the other ones, because like you get into all the other factions and they have dedicated units for hitting people with swords that they just don't have one. So of course they're not going to try and do that. So their inability to engage on that one is taken as an unwillingness to do so out of like either condescension or whatever reason people rationalize for it. But it's just the fact that they literally cannot do that. So you end up with the problem of these two phases are the fun that you as a Tau player are allowed to have. And then there's the fun that everyone else wants to have, but because you can't have it, then you have to find out ways to counteract and no-sell all of that in order to actually have any fun yourself without getting deleted. And this finally leads into the problem of they're disappointing their own audience with this, because every faction in 40K caters to a different kind of audience with it. And really the primary audience, like that this is also a meme, is that the primary audience for the Tau are like Mecha and Gundam fans, because they have a whole bunch of big stompy robots with like laser guns or whatever. And this does not play into that because all of the mechanics around all this force you to kind of keep very tight control on your positioning and making sure that you can kind of play keep away at all times, just to make sure you don't get too close and get deleted. And you gotta manage your laser pointers, you gotta manage your positioning and everything, and just try and score what little points you can get, because again, this was a problem with some of the other larger game systems, because one of the big selling points of 9th edition was like, hey, we're going to make the game more fun by making you score points by charging onto objectives and forcing people off of them by hitting people with swords. Can we see how that's a problem for the faction that can't hit people with swords and therefore can't charge at people and therefore can't do that? Yeah, that was a fun era. And I've mentioned some names here, so I should also mention that this comes from, if you've ever seen design discussion around Magic the Gathering, they have essentially 3 player personalities that they base their design off of. These are Timmy, Johnny, and Spike. Timmy is the big fun, like, I want to play the biggest, dumbest, stupidest thing possible, and I don't care if I win, but I'm having fun because I get to play the big, dumb, stupid thing. I love those kinds of players. They're real fun. There's Johnny, who mostly uses the game as a form of self-expression, which kind of plays into the deck builder aspect of Magic. But generally just like, this is a strategy and a build that only I could have come up with, and I have found ways to make it somewhat viable, but not necessarily like the most meta ever. But I'm more focused on having something that's mine rather than something that wins consistently. And that's also cool, but like, that's also not catered to by this one, just due to the lack of viable options here. And by viable, I don't mean like you could win tournaments with it. By viable, I mean like you don't get wiped out in 3 turns. And then finally we have Spike. Spike wants to win. Spike will review the beta and go through they will run the numbers and find the absolute most optimized thing that they could do in order to win games consistently, and that is the only thing that they care about. So the problem with all of these really terrible mechanical problems is that by all rights, the big stompy robot faction with a whole bunch of like mechs running for it should by all rights be a Timmy dominated faction. You should come to this one for like the big dumb stupid robot, wow, cool robot bit. And it doesn't let you do that because the mechanics of it are just so terrible that you have to manage all these things that really kind of knuckle downish in that way. So it essentially forces Timmys to become Spikes, just not because they actually want to like go on and make top grade in tournaments or whatever, but just because they want to exist and have fun. It's almost like we play games to have fun a lot of the time. And that's not a fun experience to have. That's not fun to play. That's not fun to play against. Because if you're playing against a Spike and you're trying to have like a casual like pickup match, that's not fun because the Spike is going to delete you. And this also led to the faction as a whole having this very widely hated reputation just because they are unable to have fun in the way that everyone else is able to have fun just because the game design said no. So this is just bad looks all around, and I hope I have adequately explained how bad it is, the ways it is bad, and also just we as game designers should not allow this to happen because fundamentally the onus is on us. It did not have to be this way. There is no hard and fast rule saying that these couldn't be changed. There's no hard and fast rule saying that like there's no reason that the universe could convene for them to not have space magic Yu-Gi-Oh cards or anything, any other fix that they would be able to come up with. Just like making fixes to make the gameplay fun without like, I'm rambling a bit, I apologize, but again, it's in the hands of the game designer to fix issues like this and to diagnose them so that you have a game that is fun to play for the people who are playing it. I'm going to shut up about that now. Questions so far? All right. So this is the part of the presentation that pivots over to like, how do we identify balance issues in your game? And by your, I mean whatever person is doing the game development, regardless of the actual scale of it, and ways to diagnose and fix that. So just a little side note on some statistics methods that I'm going to be mentioning here. We have expected value. This is essentially a weighted average for, it takes all the things and multiplies them by their likelihood of happening and then sums them up. And the end result of that is basically the value that you would get on average from whatever thing you're getting. And that can be really useful just for kind of, when you have random chance involved, this is a way of estimating what it would be outside of that random chance, as well as standard deviation. I assume everyone here knows what standard deviation is. Questions? All right, cool. So yeah, there are ways of calculating this. As I found out with one of the examples, it would probably have been simpler to do. Like, if you don't need an exact measure, it can be easier to just do a like high sample Monte Carlo example. And Monte Carlo is just a fancy word for spaghetti throwing, where you run it through the random chance thing a whole bunch of times and record the results and then average them. And then there you go. That's your value. So you can do that for both of these, and there are tools for doing that I've linked in the end of the presentation, but also just we got, what do you do when you have one of these macro scale balance issues? And I'm trying to relay a story about how I tried to address that because I ran into this. You are not immune to balance issues because I'm not immune to balance issues. So feel free to point and laugh at my terribly made tabletop system that I definitely didn't write. Like, I swear, I'm working on the second version of it now, given that the first version was written in a week when I was incredibly burnt out. So that I forgot to write half the basic mechanics for it. It's a travesty, and I'm trying to replace it. But yeah, so step one is play test your game. even if it's internal, even if it's just you sitting down there with like something in Notepad or whatever, rolling dice on it, play test your game. Just identify issues early, and if you have people, which ideally you would have people, because this is a game development club, it's almost as if there are people here who like playing games. You can play test with people and get their feedback on it. For other people, play testing your game is a really nice sanity check for what someone who was not in the trenches implementing it would do with this system. And that's very valuable because you kind of end up with a warped perspective on things as a result of working on something for long enough. And in my case, when I was doing playtesting on this one, I had noticed that I had made kind of a more tankier character to try and test out some of the damage mechanics in the very base version of it. And they got deleted turn one without being able to do anything, despite the fact that they were the highest HP character on that whole board. That's a problem. And it wasn't even like a major investment from the opposing side to do this anyway. It was like one of the enemies with a basic attack, no resources invested, no special features, no anything, just basic attack, one hit kill. So even if you're not super into the whole like, oh, we need to make sure things are perfectly balanced for competitive sake here, there's a baseline amount of like, even if this were a single player game, this would not fly. This would still be a problem. So basically identifying where the problem was, I had written up I could probably like post the Python script that I used for this, but it was literally just taking what type of dice it is, how many of them, and a modifier, and it'll spit out some of these statistics about it. And then just took the things directly from the write-up, threw those in there to get the expected value for kind of these factor into your damage output, as we'll see later, and then we have health, so getting general values for that. And the attacking mechanics for this one were a bit more complicated than they needed to be. Back when I was playtesting this, they've been simplified now, but basically you end up with these three scenarios for how much damage you do. And as we noticed with calculating that average damage that you would do on base as well as extra, even if you only get one of the two successes, you would deal a total amount of damage of about 5.5 on average, compared to the average HP value of 12. Can we see the problem here? Can we? So already this was a big indicator of where the problem lay. And in terms of how to fix this, the usual things that would come to mind are like, all right, we can decrease the raw damage that we do. We can increase the amount of reduction of damage. Like some systems end up with like a damage reduction stat or whatever, or AC, or this is how. AC is actually closer to this lowest one for decreasing the likelihood of extra damage being done. Because if you have a higher AC, it's less likely to be damage at all. As well as just buffing up your health pool, which I'm pretty sure buffing up health pool was what I ended up doing, but I also changed some of the damage as well. So this was kind of the modified rules on the right here that I'd gone with. And it's not necessarily to understand any of this because I have a whole document of whatever, but the whole point was that it has a far shorter range of base damage as well as it essentially took the old base health and buffed it. So the original system was 2d6 plus these two modifiers. Now it's 6 plus 1d6. So there's just less random chance there. You always get that amount of health as maximum on that first chunk. So it makes you a bit beefier and less likely to get destroyed. So that gave us some much nicer output there in terms of the average health versus damage ratio. And then another one of the things that I did for this one was trying to get a sense of what was reasonable. So the answer to that was just looking at games that already exist. So my rough estimation for this, based off of what I had seen from this game, if anyone has played this game, let me know because I want to talk about it. But you essentially get to like 10 to 20% damage as the percentage is like percentage of your total health pool from one basic attack. So that was roughly the range that they were working with. And the fix that we had proposed earlier on the last slide had these percentages, which were much lower, which we probably could have told just from the fact that 1.5 damage is the average, which is a little low and kind of a, because that rule also applies for players. You don't want players dealing 1 damage as a default for anything. That's bad game design. 1 damage is like game design speak for you didn't do crap. And yeah, so we shifted from this like 4.5% over to 8 to 33 with 12 on average, which lines up kind of nicely with what it was in this one. And that gets into the fact that we upped the health pool again. We just completely eliminated that random chance there and made it more based off of your stats rather than trying to dice roll something and get screwed over by dice rolls. I know as people here who played D&D, anytime you roll a 1 on your health increase for leveling up, that's the worst feeling in the world, isn't it?
So bad. I did it 3 times in a row.
Oh, no. You have my condolences. But yeah, nobody wants that. That's not fun. So also buffed the damage by 1, which ended up actually getting buffed again. Which is, again, we're getting into more play testing. Even after this, like, next fix was looking promising, this is just statistics on a piece of paper. This doesn't actually tell us whether it's fun to play in the end, so play tested it again. I think this was, what was this, Sunday when I play tested this last? But it was less swingy, and it didn't just destroy people instantly. Well, it still allowed for, like, big ol', I'm going all in on my thing, and it lets you do a big number damage. So, yeah, not one-shotting things unless they're designed to be one-shot. I have designed things for this game to be one-shot because it's kind of like, if you've ever seen something like Power Rangers, they have all the classic mooks where like, you just want an AoE, and it's like, hey, you see that group of 6 mooks over there? Yeah, I don't want to anymore. And that's a nice, things that give people feelings of power, it's doing that. And also, this gets into the forgetting to write game mechanics. I literally forgot to write a default range for what things do, which is a problem because then you don't know what range calculations are supposed to be when you're playing. This is why you internal play test before you external play test, because then you can catch things like this. And you don't have to have the awkward like, hey, what's the range on this? Like, we'll go with 2 inches for that. But yeah, lessons learned from this one is that metrics are never a perfect measure of how well something is going to do, because this actually did a little better than I was expecting. Don't forget to write game mechanics. And just general bit of advice here is like, balance is good, but just get it to a point where it works unless you're making this like massive multiplayer thing that's supposed to be esports oriented. Like maybe then work on really fine-tuning the balance. Otherwise, it doesn't necessarily matter, especially not if the imbalance is tilted towards the player. This is where you get the absolutely massive hitboxes for like close range attacks that make absolutely no sense in reality, but it lets you do cool things as a player, and people are never going to complain about being more effective than they're supposed to be.
I get 1 tap, but they're kind of like being OP.
So yeah, these were the resources that I had linked previously for NumPy. Was really useful for this. This was how I actually wrote that Python script that calculates all the statistics behind it, because NumPy is nice. It has some built-in statistic stuff with it that you can just like generate a random sample of whatever and say go on some statistics function, and it'll just spit out the data, and it's nice. You don't have to write all the math backend behind it. I actually did write the math backend behind it, trying to do the pure math, like multiply everything by the probability thing. It was horrible. I don't recommend that. If you have never experienced the horrors of 5 for loops that are nested inside each other, don't do that. Find some other design for your code before you do that. Yeah, organized spaghetti throwing for not having to do that, but still getting a general sense of this is what it's supposed to be. They're a pretty good indicator, but they're not like perfectly mathematically exact, and they kind of they vary in effectiveness based off of what random sample you got. Then you got analyzing games that already exist and that already did it right, so that leverage the brain power of those who came before, so you don't have to build things from zero. As well as, this is a nice thing of buffing rather than nerfing things. This is a philosophy that I've seen a lot of games adopt, because then instead of just taking things away from people, you add on new layers that change how they think and accomplish the goal without it feeling like a negative. So this was when I wanted to put in an example of, say you have a problem in your game where like, all right, snipers are too good. Maybe this is CSGO or whatever, and you want to nerf the op. Because like, just, you don't want players to have a point and click adventure game, because that's not what the game is, and that's not what they're supposed to be doing. So one option would be like, all right, then just like have the damage of it so that it isn't as effective.
Yeah, that would be real sick. I'm an op crush.
Op crutches in the crowd. All right then. I don't know. I never really got the point and click adventure thing. I mostly run like P90 and Deagle because it's fun to just like strafe people. It does when you get to jump around like a spider monkey.
You just make the op like randomly lower your sensitivity.
That's one way of doing it. I don't think people would react very positively to that. But yeah, another way of doing this using this kind of philosophy would be like, all right, what if we make it so that the damage you do is decreased up to a certain amount based off of how far you are from the target. So you do more damage up close and less from far away. So it doesn't completely eliminate the point and click adventure style, but it does make it so that you have the choice. It introduces a choice between, am I going to turtle back and like do chip damage on people, because that's also a strategy you could do, and like trust your teammates to take care of the rest, or you could try to move up a bit in order to buff up your damage a little bit while also putting yourself in more danger because you're not halfway across Dust 2. I feel like that would feel both, sure, they'd probably complain about it initially, but it would also add another layer to the play style rather than, I don't think anyone genuinely enjoys just standing in a corner and clicking on things. That's my hot take here.
Kill people crossing long. It's expensive, you know. That's like my aim is bad, so I'm gonna lose it. So like,
Not everyone's
like
interest.
$0.
I want my time to lively.
Is that truly worth it though? Is that the engaging gameplay experience you came here for?
I don't sit in the corner. I like run out with off and like run in the middle of the battlefield.
Yeah,
My eventually would do
my
that.
dumbass tries to no scope people.
They should make it only no scope. That's the thing.
there is no scope mode. That's the way.
Or is only double scope.
Oh, that would be good. It's like a pinball. It's like that's all you have.
Which is interesting because Dust 2 actually got like they kind of helped it where they just blocked where the map was, so you couldn't shoot into mid doors. You had to move first. You couldn't do it from spawn as easily. So that's kind of like a balance, but not like directly related. They kind of like did the like actual cause of people's madness rather than the opposite.
Yeah, that also gets into map design. I really should have included that in the presentation when I talked about the design of Dust 2 and why it's so good, but I did not. That did not occur to me. I really should reuse that heat map graphic though. Had a dedicated heat map for like where each side goes first based off like in time to try and demonstrate the design of it and its little routing of where people go first.
There's a reason why Dust 2 is still being used for 20 years.
Yeah, that's neither here nor there, but
That's like the try of Valorant. That's like first CSGO. Like for some reason the map design Valorant, like I just cannot like adjust to it.
I feel like Valorant is just like for people who like CS:GO, but also like triangular suppressors.
Like the accent.
I can't play for too long or else I'll get the accent.
The what?
You don't know about the Valorant accent?
Like customer service ones?
Literally brain dead, man.
It's like the accent where people talk like inclinating, like you know how like in English you close the bottom or the last syllable? And the Valorant accent does the opposite.
Oh,
It's so weird. Like you go up and like volume, I guess pitch, I don't know, as you say the sentence.
so you're saying that Valorant is free voice training?
Sort of.
Noted.
Also have
Let
to
me
play
write that
balance.
down real quick.
You also have to play Valorant, so it's kind of like it's a balance. in
Yeah.
itself.
It's like I won, but at what cost?
Totally.
Did I have any more? No, that's the end of the presentation. It's like 9 minutes left. That's all I had for the slides. Yeah, I can pull up the actual. Yeah, designing this game. Let me pull the dang thing up. Yeah, designing this game was a whole time because I had written up a initial version of it that was like, I want to say 20, 30 pages long, and it's been shortened to maybe 2 pages in this new version. Yeah, exactly 2 pages for the entire core rule set that I'm working with right now. It doesn't have any of the like kind of classes or flavor or whatever on it, but it functions far better than the original with far less text. So simple but expandable is definitely a thing to go for. Yeah, also just one of the things that never really gets talked about in like going between video and tabletop design is that the actual way that you word things in tabletop games is far more important because this is the sole resource that people have for understanding what your intention was. So you end up kind of writing with the rules lawyers in mind, like in your brain while you're writing it, like how would people exploit this wording? And then trying to counteract that as you're writing it. So a lot of this ends up reading like legalese. And if you're ever wondering why it's like that, that's why it's like that, because you're trying to defend against the rules lawyers. So yeah, that's about all I had for this one.
I do like how balancing is more like you have to try and find the root cause. Which a lot of balancing problems like are like you try and treat the symptoms but not the problem. I find it's like really easy to just like, oh, you're like this is not happening as like players expect, so let me try and fix the symptom itself. Yeah, but a lot of the times it's like an underlying issue which takes it might not be a problem.